The deadline's up for state attorneys general to decide whether they'll join the multi-billion-dollar foreclosure settlement. This would force the big banks to overhaul their mortgage practices and could include upwards of $25 billion in penalties. But not every state is on board. The California AG is objecting to a provision that protects banks from future lawsuits over this matter. Let's bring in our panel on this one. Marjorie Clifton is the national independent editor of GoVote.com in D.C. Joey Jackson is an attorney, and Rachel Kugel is a criminal defense attorney. Rachel, let's start with you. Why is California the holdout here?
Well, they're holding out because of the problem that all of us see with it, which is that, this is the biggest industry settlement since Big Tobacco, and yet it does nothing to make investors more comfortable. Investors are still going to be nervous. It leaves open-ended whether or not real people, other AGs from other states, can sue, which the New York Attorney General did recently, actually.
And, Joe, it's not really putting a lot of people, keeping them at least in their homes. And
that's what we need. But ultimately, how much can you investigate this matter? We know things went awry. Now's the time to attempt to keep those people who can be in their homes, to modify mortgages, to lessen interest rates, and you know what, to get this thing away and to keep it moving. There does need to be more protections built in to protect consumers, not only now but in the future, but enough's enough. California needs to get on board, New York needs to get on board, and we have to create a better housing market in general.
Marjorie, we've been trying to get a deal here on the robo-signing ordeal for over a year and a half now. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think the key is that we need to protect consumers, and this legislation will take an important step in doing so. But more importantly, I think that it means that they can't be foreclosing upon a consumer at the same time while they're negotiating their new mortgage terms. I mean, the reparations won't do much to pull people who've already been foreclosed upon, but I think it will make headway.
Did you want to react?
And ultimately, what needs to happen is that, if California goes on board, it's better overall. You can't settle anything, Lori, unless you have, as an entity,
well, that was ground zero for the mortgage
disaster.
Because
ultimately, if they don't sign waivers saying we're not going to sue again, then what's the incentive to get the thing resolved?
But that's the other side of the coin, though. Much like a class action, all it's really doing is getting individual people maybe $1,800 to $2,000 and not really doing anything to give individuals any real benefit.
For what it's worth, I believe these penalties have already been priced into the bank stocks, so you're not going to see a problem on that front. But let's move on and talk about GM. Speaking of stocks, company on the road to recovery big time. The bailed-out automaker set to release its 2011 earnings with $8 billion in net income next week. $8 billion. Not to mention the company's estimating a $10 billion profit for the year. This after having a major presence in last night's Super Bowl. Marjorie, we'll start with you for this one. I mean, how does it make you feel hearing that GM is so successful all of a sudden when, as taxpayers, we still own a considerable portion of them?
Well, we own 26%, according to what everyone's reporting. And I think this is actually a big win for the Obama administration. It was a very risky move to bail out the automakers like this. And hats off to GM for getting lean and mean and actually making such an amazing turnaround. And if you saw the Super Bowl commercial, it was actually in the Mayan apocalypse in 2012, and you saw the trucks rumbling out of the dust, and that they'd still survived, which I thought was a really great metaphor for what GM has done in this turnaround.
But Joey, that stock price has to just about double so that taxpayers are recouped what they are on the hook for.
And it would be optimistic to suggest that it will, but it might, and we've come a long way. To think about the bailout and how it was panned, we can't bail them out, they should be on their own. They should fail, or not should fail, but should at least make efforts to help themselves before taxpayers do. But in the final analysis, if they're making profits like this, go with your bad self.
Rachel?
It's definitely good news, but we have to look at long-term earnings and not these short projections, whether it's quarterly or yearly. It's yet to be seen how much we've really made or lost.
Staying power.
That's right.
All right, Motor City rock star, speaking of Detroit, Kid Rock claims he's all for his hometown of Detroit. But latest reports claim his Made in Detroit T-shirts aren't. I know you have one under your seat there, Joey. In fact, they're not even made in the United States. Most, in fact, are missing a label telling exactly where the garments are made, while others discreetly say made in the Dominican Republic.
It's sunny in the Dominican Republic. Why wouldn't they be made there? Come on. No, listen, it's a common problem. And if there are expenses associated with making products that are astronomical, you're going to go and seek out venues, which makes it more affordable to do so. And that's what you have here, and that's what you have in a lot of other instances. The irony, obviously, is you look at the label, you look at the name, and then, of course, it's made elsewhere.
See, I think the label should just say, instead of made in Detroit, Rachel, saved by a Detroit rock star.
That's a good one. I think, though, the other problem is, and this is a legal problem as a lawyer, is that if the tag doesn't say where it's made, there can be actually trade commission problems with that, I believe. They have to actually disclose where an item is made, and if they don't, there could be some legal trouble.
Thinking like a lawyer.
Was there a report, too, that possibly these shirts were made in Ohio, which would almost be worse than if they were made in the Dominican Republic? Marjorie, I'll let you weigh in.
Yeah, no, and I think the hypocrisy when it comes to retail always exists, and this is always a problem. Now, the interesting thing was that Chinese chopsticks, the ones that are actually used in China, are made in a factory about 2 hours south of Atlanta, which I thought was really interesting. So we're seeing on the flip side as well, it's now becoming very trendy for the Chinese to wear made in America clothes. So maybe there's hope for us still.
Okay, so all's fair in love and war. Guys, Marjorie, Joey, Rachel, you guys are sticking around for our next segment. So when we return, one World Bank posting the names of defaulters in the papers, shaming them. Should that idea make its way over here? Talk about that one next. That's okay.
Goodbye, ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain.
Just when you thought the Occupy Wall Street movement was finally behind us, Roosevelt University in Chicago is actually adding a political science course titled Occupy Everywhere. The curriculum requires students to read the movement's newspapers and attend its meetings. Back to our panel, Marjorie Clifton of GoVote.com and attorneys Joey Jackson and Rachel Kugel. Guys, welcome back. Joey, gives a little credibility to this movement.
But I think it's a great idea. Look, I think institutions of learning, they're important, but we have to move away from strictly academic, and we have to start teaching people about real life, real experiences, you know, and in doing that, you teach them about history and why people are all riled up and, you know, want to make changes for the future. So I think it's an idea whose time has come. Teach more.
But Rachel, doesn't it give credibility to a movement that was highly controversial? And maybe that's why it's historical, but there was a lot of people, let's be honest, were just using this as an excuse.
I'm all for studying it. I think, you know, maybe we can actually get to the bottom of what the Occupy Wall Street people really wanted, because that was always something that was kind of hard to figure out. I think the irony of it is didn't the Occupy Wall Street people say that we should walk out of college courses and protest student loans and how much college costs? I mean, pretty much it's only the 1%ers that can afford these college tuitions these days.
Marjorie, it's always good to have a dialogue about these things. Current events, right? That's always been a course.
Yeah, well, and also there is actually a Tea Party course at one of the high schools that's a college prep student. So I think all's fair again, and it's current events. It's a way for people to actually get involved, and I think that better learning happens when you're actually out in the field doing what works, what doesn't, and you know, it's all about social movement, and that's really what Occupy is about.
I'd be curious to see the curriculum in that course, you know, to see if they actually do their own Occupy.
Field trip.
Right, there you go.
Got to be ready to camp. Got to be ready to camp.
Yeah, bring your supplies. Well, Facebook founder, you know, talking about the 1% here, Mark Zuckerberg won't be friending the IRS anytime soon. As a result of the upcoming IPO, Zuckerberg will have to pay $2 billion in taxes. So, Marjorie, it's interesting, you know, when Facebook filed the SEC paperwork to go public, we sure learned a lot about Zuckerberg and his finances. $2 billion to the IRS. I mean, that's just astronomical.
It is, but he's still got $3 billion to walk with, which is more than the GDP of Belize and many African countries. So at 27 years old, he's worth $23 billion on paper. The guy isn't hurting too much. And I think he could actually give Mitt Romney a lesson in how to actually submit your tax statements ahead of being asked.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. So, Rachel, what do you think about this $2 billion? You know, we talk about deficit reduction and all, you know, higher taxes.
First of all,
you know.
good problem to have, first of all. It's not something I will ever complain about if I have to pay $2 billion in taxes, number one. And number two is that the reality is, you know, she mentioned Mitt Romney. What the real strategy is going to be here is he's going to sell enough shares to pay to cover that tax. Yeah. Then when he continues to make capital gains in the future on whatever's left over, he gets at that 15% that Mitt Romney's at. So this is actually the Mitt Romney strategy, in effect.
Yeah, but doesn't it? So what do you think Zuckerberg's, if he ever went public, on his thoughts for the Buffett rule, you know, tax the wealthy more?
I think that if he ever went public with everything, he'd be able to pay off the debt of this country and many others. It's a phenomenal thing that he has all that money. But ultimately, it couldn't come at a better time. I mean, you know, we're a government starving for money, and right now they're taking $2 billion. California's getting $500 million, Lori. That's outrageous. A lot of taxes
let's
to
just
pay.
hope he's got something like 56% control with the deal once it goes public. I mean, let's hope that he is influential in a good way.
Well, there's also a corporate benefit, though. The corporation gets actually a mirror benefit, I believe. So there's some concern that Facebook's actually not going to have to pay
any taxes
yeah,
at
for,
all.
They won't
for
pay
who
any
knows, a
taxes, yeah.
generation possibly in mirroring this tax benefit.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, we'd like to think it's noble, but in the end, it's actually going to benefit his own stock. But
All right. Name and shame. That's the approach the State Bank of India is taking for those who aren't making their payments on time, even when they've got the money to do it. The nation's biggest lender is posting names and pictures of willful defaulters, as they call them, in newspapers. To get them to pay up, Rachel, would that work for you? Would you be shamed into it?
I probably would, but it's never going to happen here. We have way too many credit reporting acts and Fair Trade Debt Collection Act practices, and you would be sued up the wazoo if you ever tried to pull this on an
I
American.
don't know. I mean, just a simple sign, Joey?
Yeah, you know, just put a sign on people. You owe money. You failed to pay your debts, your taxes, and everything else. Not something whose idea has come in the United States. If they want to do it there, they'll try it. There'll be a test case.
We do it for child support sometimes, but that's about it.
Yeah, you drag people into court. Sometimes people need to be shamed.
All right, Marjorie, your thoughts? You think it'll
yeah,
work?
actually, I think we should implement this for people who litter, who talk on their cell phones in the grocery line, who don't
absolutely.
RSVP. We could actually put this into great use. But I do think it's actually a great sign that India is taking note from Greece and from the United States and taking action ahead of time so that they're not defaulting. They're becoming a rising power and a very important one.
I mean,
but
it's
I do like
almost
their tactic.
better to be shamed than to actually have to pay penalties for defaulting. I mean, pick your poison, right? Wouldn't it be better just to have a little embarrassment than to have to shell out cash if you're already tight on it?
Well, I suppose, but that's the thing is that, you know, in our economy where people are hurting so much, I mean, to add shame on top of people who, you know, are already having difficulty or having to choose, you know, who gets to pick who gets shamed or who has enough money to pay if you're choosing between paying.
I have no shame, and I'm cheap, and I'd rather be embarrassed. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Marjorie, Joey, and Rachel, thanks again.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Laura.
All right, the Giants may have won the big game, but who came out on top?